In the early 1940s, Saigon was a thriving French colonial city, characterized by its bustling markets, elegant colonial architecture, and a vibrant mix of cultures. The streets were filled with the sounds of daily life, from merchants selling their goods to the chatter of locals and French officials. This period of relative peace and prosperity would soon be shattered by the winds of war as the Japanese Empire set its sights on Southeast Asia. In 1941, Japanese troops marched into Saigon, marking the beginning of their occupation. The city's streets, once filled with the sounds of commerce, now echoed with the heavy boots of soldiers and the rumble of military vehicles. The arrival of the Japanese forces brought an abrupt end to the calm, as Saigon became a strategic hub for Japan's expansion in Southeast Asia. The French colonial administration in Saigon quickly crumbled under the Japanese advance. In a swift and decisive move, French officials were forced to surrender control to the Japanese. Government buildings that once flew the French tricolor now bore the rising sun flag, symbolizing the new power in the city. This marked a dramatic shift in Saigon's political landscape. Under Japanese occupation, daily life in Saigon changed dramatically. The city was subjected to strict military control, with soldiers patrolling the streets and enforcing new regulations. Rationing became a necessity, and propaganda posters promoting Japanese ideals were plastered across the city. Despite these changes, the resilience of Saigon's inhabitants began to surface as they adapted to their new reality. As the occupation dragged on, resistance against Japanese rule began to take root. Underground groups formed, secretly planning acts of defiance and sabotage. These brave individuals risked their lives to challenge the occupiers, driven by a desire to reclaim their city and their freedom. The seeds of rebellion were sown, setting the stage for a growing wave of resistance. The Japanese occupation brought severe economic hardships to Saigon. The once thriving markets were now empty, and many families struggled to make ends meet. Forced labor became a common practice as the Japanese sought to exploit the local population for their war efforts. The city's economy was in shambles, and the people of Saigon endured great suffering as a result. As World War II progressed, Saigon became a target for Allied bombings. The city, once a symbol of colonial grandeur, was now scarred by the ravages of war. Air raids brought destruction and chaos, forcing civilians to seek shelter wherever they could. The bombings intensified the suffering of Saigon's inhabitants as the war reached its climax. By 1945, Japanese control over Saigon was weakening. The Allied victories in the Pacific Theater had turned the tide of the war, and the Japanese forces in Saigon were struggling to maintain order. The city's infrastructure was deteriorating, and the resistance was gaining momentum. The end of Japanese rule was in sight, and Saigon's people began to hope for liberation. In 1945, the Japanese occupation of Saigon came to an end. The city was liberated, and French control was reinstated. The streets that had once been filled with the sounds of war now echoed with the cheers of celebrating crowds. The French tricolor was raised once more, marking a new chapter in Saigon's history, though the scars of occupation remained. After the war, Saigon began the long process of rebuilding. The city's people worked to restore what had been lost, while also reflecting on the impact of the occupation. Memorials were erected to honor those who had suffered and resisted, and a sense of hope began to emerge. Though the scars of war would take time to heal, Saigon's resilience shone through as it moved towards a new future.